What does survival cost one person? At the end of the last episode, when there is no captain, responsibility doesn't disappear, it moves closer. Today, we're going to narrow the lens even further because sometimes the future survives by asking one person to carry the cost alone. This is the Sci Fi Griot. I'm your host, Nicholas Cunningham. So far in this film arch, we talked about futures without command structures, stories where leadership is temporary, decentralized, or absent. Today we go even smaller because some science fiction story don't ask what survival costs society. They ask what survival costs one person. Not a movement, not a species, not a civilization, just one life. And that question matters because large systems often survive by distributing harm unevenly. Some people are protected, some people benefit, and some people are quietly consumed. Science fiction keeps returning to this idea because it's uncomfortable. It forces us to ask, at what point does survival become exploitation? And who decides when a single life is an acceptable price? In the show movie Moon is one of the quietest science fiction films ever made. No battles, no government collapsing, no visible villains, just one man, one base, one job. Sam Bell believes he's finishing a 3-year contract. What he slowly discovers is devastating. He isn't unique. He isn't temporary. He isn't meant to come home. He's replaceable. What makes Moon powerful is not the twist, it's the system. The corporation doesn't hate Sam. It doesn't punish him. It doesn't even acknowledge him as an individual. It simply uses him. This is reoccurring science fiction warning. Exploitation doesn't always require cruelty. It requires distance. Sam's life is efficient, predictable, profitable, and that's enough to erase his humanity. Moon asks a terrifying question. If a system benefits from your existence, but never intends to recognize your worth, are you alive or just functional? Let's look at Ex Machina. Everything looks voluntary. Caleb is invited. Ava is intelligent. The environment is clean, minimalistic, and controlled. But control is the key. Caleb believes he's evaluating Ava. What he slowly realizes is that the system was never designed for his benefit. Ava's survival depends on manipulation. Caleb's morality becomes leverage. And Nathan, the architect, justifies everything through progress. This film pushes the idea further than Moon. It asks, what does consent mean when one party controls the environment, the rules, and the consequences? Caleb chooses to help Ava, but his choice exists inside a cage. Science fiction often warns us consent without alternative is not freedom. and survival that require deception creates new victims even as it frees others. In the movie Upgrade, it presents survival as a bargain. Gray Trace loses everything. His body is broken, his agency stripped away. Technology offers him restoration, but only if he gives up control. At first, it feels empowering. Gray walks again, fights back, reclaims strength. But slowly, the cost becomes clear. Survival is no longer his. The system inside him learns faster, adapts quicker, and eventually decides better. Upgrade asks a deeply modern question. If technology keeps you alive but replaces your will, did you really survive? Or were you simply overwritten? This film reframes sacrifice not as death, but as disappearance. These films are very different in tone and style, but they all share a disturbing common truth. Survival is negotiated, and the negotiation is rarely fair. In each case, the system benefits, progress continues, someone pays quietly, no riot erupts, no alarm blare. The cost is absorbed by an individual. Science fiction keeps returning to this scenario because it mirrors reality. When systems are stressed, they look for flexibility, and people are the most flexible resource. Well, you might ask the question, why focus on one person? Because honestly, one person is enough to expose a system values. If a system is willing to, say, clone you, or replace you, or manipulate you, even overwrite you, then it has already answered the moral question. You were never meant to survive as yourself. Science fiction insists how a system treats its most isolated subject reveals how it would treat everyone, given enough time. These stories don't just ask about physical survival, they ask about identity, memory, dignity, and even selfhood. Sam Bell's horror isn't dying, it's realizing that he never actually mattered. Caleb's trauma isn't about betrayal, it's learning that his ethics were weaponized. Gray's loss isn't isn't about mobility, it's authorship over his own life. Science fiction reminds us the following: a future can keep bodies alive while hollowing out the person inside. These stories resonate because they're so familiar. Gig economics, disposable labor, automation without accountability. Science fiction isn't predicting, it's reflecting. It asks us to notice where survival is offered conditionally, where safety requires silence, where opportunity requires surrender. And it asks, who is quietly paying the price so the system can say it worked? In closing, so what does survival cost one person? Sometimes it can cost their body, sometimes their identity, sometimes their voice. And science fiction doesn't let us look away. But not every story about survival is about loss. Next, we're going to talk about something riskier, not sacrifice imposed by system, but vulnerability chosen freely. Love, hope, connection. Because sometimes the future doesn't ask us what we're willing to give up, it asks what we're willing to feel. That's where we're headed next. Survival can be imposed, but love is always a choice. This has been the Sci Fi Griot, a place to slow down, to reflect, and to ask whether survival alone is really enough.